Press go, there we are. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Hello, and welcome to Office Hours Stag Radios podcast, where we take a step beyond the lecture theatre and into the lives of the lecturers that shape our unique experiences. Today, I'm joined by...
Hi, I'm Dr. Liz Boz. I am a senior lecturer in creative writing.
So the first question I wanted to ask you was the idea of the human behind the lecturer. So let's take a step away from the jobs, a step away from the titles and the publishing. What's the one thing about this subject that hooked you, that you were like, this is what I'm going to do?
Okay, that's a big question, Sophia. I think it's not even the subject, it's broader than that. It's books. So I was absolutely obsessed with memorizing books when I was a very small child.
Wow.
I have a picture of myself reading a book. And I just remember feeling really passionate about wanting to learn to read. And my poor mom would read me books and she would be very patient with me. And I eventually remember this feeling of like amazement when I could read my first book. I think I was at home with the chicken pox when it happened. But from then it was just like, I absolutely fell in love with books and reading. And then a few years later, writing. So, yeah.
So what was it about the writing as well? So you said you love to read books. So what was it about the books that gripped you in, and then the writer? How did you sort of merge the two together?
I loved sound and rhythm. I think like most kids do. I loved nursery rhymes, and I loved Dr. Seuss, who was like a major influence on me. And then I had a really fantastic third grade teacher. She was crazy. She had these like hooked nails, and she had us all sit down and do a writing competition where you had to write a book, a whole book, and you had to illustrate it yourself. So I wrote a book when I was 8, and she collected them all up. We had to actually make the book covers and everything, and she sent them off to the competition, and my book won 3rd prize.
Oh, wow.
And so that was really important. But what was more impactful was they bundled us all onto a school bus, and we got to go down to a university and actually meet the librarians and walk around. And I was just like dazzled. I thought, oh my God, I have to like work somewhere like this.
Yeah.
And so that was really a really big impact in my life when I was still in primary school. Yeah.
So you grew up in the States, right? How was that different to, being here? And what was that like for you?
Other than the weather, it isn't that different. I mean, everyone is still in a university environment. It's kind of a bubble, as you know. So the students that are here love learning and they want to make the most of their experience. And I think that's how I found it with my own professors, my own teachers. I had some amazing teachers right the way through school. My equivalent to A-level English Lit teacher also taught creative writing.
Oh, wow.
And she, along with a couple of other my high school English teachers, really instilled in us the value of looking at writing historically as well. So we learned history alongside of English. So we learned the French Revolution while also reading A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. And then when I got to year 12, we had to sit down and get down to work. So we did lots of creative writing. And I think a big impact on me there was one of my teachers took T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland, and she divided the sections up with different groups in class. And we had to do like a deep dive on the poem. We had to create posters and presentations. And all over again, I then fell in love with poetry. So it's been a long process of just having really lovely teachers myself.
So speaking of, your love for literature and your love for books and everything, what is one academic project or one research project that absolutely consumed you?
It still is consuming me. So there's like a love project that I would love to be able to work on. But at the moment, I'm focusing on a different book. So this project, which is in its early stages, I'm calling poems from a lost botanist. And it combines my love of plants and poetry. And I've been writing little poems for it for about 10 years and putting them in a little green folder with plant stickers all over it. And I've done a couple of like short courses. I like to do short courses myself in the summer just for fun on like nature writing, travel writing. I took one class, the whole class was on walking the River Thames in London. And that was really fantastic. And each course I will produce maybe another 8 or 10 poems, put them in the folder. And I'm always thinking about this project. I think because it touches on themes that I haven't yet explored in my own writing around like, what is home? Where is home? How do you feel at home if you live really far away from where you're from? And also things like belonging and the movement of people and plants across the world. So it will become a book probably in 5 years' time, but I'm working on another project right now. So it is still just a fat green folder of poems at the moment. Yeah.
So you said this idea of like being away from home. What's your overall like consensus of that, or have you not reached a conclusion to that idea?
I think my whole life will be reaching a conclusion. Interestingly, I've always loved literature from the UK and Ireland. So that's how I ended up over here. I did study abroad in Ireland my third year at uni, and I was really passionate about studying James Joyce and Virginia Woolf. So I came over this way to do it. Where else better to do it? And I found that I've always had a fascination for the expat writers as well, although they aren't wonderful people. Like Ernest Hemingway, I've been very interested in him, writers that traveled back and forth between the US and the UK. And so I guess it doesn't surprise me that I myself go back and forth a lot, not as much as I'd like to, but teaching here feels like probably the flip side of what it would be to live in the US, where I would be teaching British literature if I live there. Where here I just teach literature. So it's kind of an interesting thing, but the conversations are always nice to bring then some American poets and American writers in here, where when I was in the US, it was all about studying British literature. So it's really nice to be doing it here.
How would you say that British literature differs from like American literature? Like, is it completely different worlds, or have they got similarities?
Well, very different underpinnings. So where we have a lot more to do with kind of like the Victorian era, the class system here. In the US, there's a lot, you study a lot of literature to do with race, and you study a lot of literature where the writers have this kind of amazing manifest destiny, which is the movement west across the unpopulated at the time American plains, or moving north in the Harlem Renaissance. So writers kind of move to find their people and their place, also move to escape oppression. And so it's just different writers that you're studying, or slightly different time periods. But when it comes to things like contemporary literature, which obviously we do a lot of here on creative writing and contemporary modules, it's really very similar books. So I will teach, for example, Stephen King. I would probably teach him in the same way here versus there, but I might talk a little bit differently about his catalog here because readers are acquainted with only maybe his major works more than his minor works. But we also teach other American and other writers from around the English-speaking world here too.
So you would say it's kind of more based on like the context of the different places that are on the culture?
Different contexts, different ways of operating in the world. So I would say Brits are very different to Americans. And I would say that's because of our culture. The culture here is very different, but essentially values and the way that people operate in the world is similar in a lot of ways. And I think now with social media, the culture is really kind of, I see it like beach and sand. We're kind of ebbing and flowing with each other in terms of like which writers are getting known. When they do book tours, they're touring, more globally now. And with social media, you can hear your favorite authors without going to visit them. So I think it kind of all is one bigger conversation now than it used to be.
So before everything, before the teaching and everything, before the pressures and all of that, what was one thing that made you click the way you were like, was it a book? Was it a project? Was it something? What was it really about this subject?
I think I remember, okay, there was a single moment. It might have been year 10 or 11 in school where a teacher made us read out loud some of Edgar Allan Poe's poetry. And I think the moment I have in mind, so everybody knows The Raven, and The Raven is a really amazing poem, lots of sound effect. But she divided the class up and she made us read his poem, The Bells, out loud. It's somewhat of a boring poem on the surface. But as we were reading it, the whole room sounded like it was filling up with bells, like the chiming of different types of bells, or at least I thought so. So I was sitting there going, oh my God, literature can do this. I want to do this. I want to do this. I want to teach this. I want to talk about it all the time. And I want to read students who are writing in this way. So that was the moment it really clicked. And I went from, should I be like a vet nurse or a biology teacher, or should I do English literature? And that was like the never return point for me when I was about 15. So yeah.
How do you think your view on that differs from, say, other young people's view? How do you think the other people in your class view that compared to you?
Some of my friends from high school I'm still in touch with. One of them is actually in the process of working with like film and editing and sound. I wonder, I'll have to ask him. How do you feel? Do you remember that moment when our teacher made us read it? They were probably annoyed. So, because I remember that feeling of like, oh, do we have to do this again? This other poetry thing that she's making us do. But that was the same year we read, The Great Gatsby and some of the other like really kind of seminal pieces of literature, American literature. And I know that most of my friends growing up loved reading and still do love reading. So I think probably they have taken that away with them on some other level that maybe is still underpinning how they find pleasure in books, I guess. I hope.
Have you kind of found like a little bit of like a community within literature and all of this, and how do you navigate that?
Yes. Yeah, well, there's like, it's like rings. There's sort of communities within communities. So our community here is a really big one. So I think I can speak for most of us when I say that when we teach you, we feel like we're part of a community with you. We're all devastated when you graduate, just FYI. And then we're like, come do an MA, do a PhD. We don't want you to go. So you'll get that from us next year. And then there's so we have our colleague community, which is actually lovely because we talk about books all the time. We talk about writing and what we're teaching. And then I have a circle of other writers that I have been working with, some of them for 20, 25 years. Yeah. So some of us met during our MAs, and all of them are now published writers themselves, mostly novelists and other poets. And so they form my kind of main community. And then I have just like normal friends who hang out. And most of them also really love books or art or something that's very creative as well. So I guess that's maybe just how life works when you work in a kind of creative area, that it ends up being the people you're close to also have things in common. Even if it's just, we really like the same type of sci-fi films, or we really like talking about time travel. There's all these kind of different layers, and I think it kind of permeates everything.
And do you take those experiences from those communities, put them in your writing, or do you?
Yes, to some extent. So there's writers like, I used to be in a writing group with some poets down in Lewis near Brighton. Actually, for a very long time, I was in a very big writing group down there. And so a poet like Janet Sutherland, who I used to work with, not only did she and her partner teach me Mahjong, which I love playing in my spare time, she worked with poetry sequence, and I work with poetry sequence. And so some of my thinking about, how to write long poems and work with long poems came from discussions I had with her maybe 15, 20 years ago. And then other writers that are in my writing groups, like there's a novelist called Beth Miller. She's just published her new book. So we go along to her book launch. I read her books and feel re-inspired by the characters she's creating. She will ask me some, creative plot input questions within our writing group. I'll ask her for some feedback on poetry. And so it sort of has these little conversations, maybe more on the level of like creative idea development. And then again, when it comes to like actual workshopping, I rely on these people who I now call my friends for feedback on my own work. And a shout out goes to those that are brave enough when they go, Liz, this is boring. You need to rework this. So thank you very much for that as well. So yeah, it's a really kind of solid, long lasting community when you can kind of form one like that.
showed you these questions before, you said that you had a love-hate relationship with this question. So,
oh no. Uh-oh.
So, what books have shaped you in the way you live today? And why did you have a love-hate relationship with this question for the viewers?
Okay, viewers, I have a love-hate relationship with this question because I always forget one of the most important books, and I will again. So I think which books have had the biggest impact on me? Sometimes they're not always books that I would go, yeah, let's talk about this one. But okay, I mentioned Dr. Seuss. Yeah. I really think One Fish, Two Fish, Red Fish, Blue Fish had a big impact on me. It was the first book I learned to read. I also really like Green Eggs and Ham a lot. The nonsense of it. Yeah. So I think Dr. Seuss has impacted me in the way that it reminds me, don't take writing too seriously. It has to be playful. It has to be fun. Otherwise, why are we doing this? You know? I think another one to kind of go on the more serious side now would be, I think T.S. Eliot's writing, his poetry has impacted me, but nowhere near as much as more contemporary poets, but his essays have impacted me. So I'm thinking of a book I have on my desk right now, the essay, The Three Voices of Poetry. That essay, which is written in kind of the 1950s, has had a ripple effect through my whole career in terms of how I studied for my PhD, the questions that I ask in my own research, and the big questions that Eliot didn't have time to answer are now the ones that my research is trying to work with, which is very daunting, I should say. I was like, oh, God, how do I feel about being in conversation with Eliot? But really thinking about, what does poetic voice mean? What does it mean to say something is dramatic now? What is it to say something is narrative or lyric? Those are loaded terms, and we often use them as very generic terms. But I think for teaching things like poetry, it's really important to think about them because it can help us improve our own approaches to writing. And then two more that I want to mention. I think the biggest impact on like my absolute love of books was when I was maybe an older child, young teenager. I absolutely love the stories by the Canadian writer Lucy Maud Montgomery. So she's best known for her Anne of Green Gables series.
Love, my favorite.
I love it. I love it. I love the adaptations. I love them. But she also has these two very little stories called The Story Girl. Okay. And they're about this group of children. So I absolutely love them. But I also love Anne's House of Dreams, which I think is the fourth novel in the Anne series. I go back to them all the time, and there's some really good free versions of that to download online for the audio that are dramatized on LibriVox, which I love LibriVox. And then finally, my favorite poets, which I will forget the list of names, but I really love Jackie Kay's work. I teach her whenever I can. I really love the American poet Gabrielle Calvacoresi. She does interesting things with writing that I kind of make me feel excited every time I read her work. She mixes form, she mixes ideas and concepts really well, and she works with poetic persona and voice. I love Jo Shapcott's weird writing. She gives animals an interesting precedence in her work. And I love poets like Philip Gross, David Harsent. I love so many of our kind of poets that are on these shores as well. Kay Syrad, Claire Best. I could go on and on and on. There's loads of poets that I love listening to. Yeah, so that's just a few. I can already think my mind is scrolling.
We have a plethora of lovely books for you guys to go and read out there, and poems.
Yeah.
We're in such an era where every single discipline is changing because of either AI or ethics or, things like this, globalization. So how do you think our field is going to change? How do you think our field is going to be affected by this?
Okay, so that's a really interesting question, and one that I was discussing with some friends recently. I think creative writers on the whole will be very anti-AI for our writing because nobody wants to have their own writing taken and reassembled and reused. But also what's original and what's interesting about my creative writers here, especially, is the amazing stuff you all come up with that I never expect, that I haven't read before, the interesting worlds and characters and all that. AI is never going to replace that, I don't think. It's not that it can't. It's that I don't think writers will want it to. But when it comes to the research side of things, I think it's a little bit worrying. So I think the way that we're going to be approaching it as Surrey is having intelligent conversations about not keeping AI out, but about how to use AI ethically. Because I think it can be an amazing research tool and a creative tool. But it's really, the impact of it is really to teach people how to use it well, without it kind of undoing all the good that human writers can do and human researchers. It certainly isn't capable of doing a lot of the things our own brains can do right now. So it's kind of putting the importance on both, I think, is going to be important in the future. Yeah. Doing the degree here, if you're doing literature and creative writing, you do have to kind of switch on different parts of your brain. So I think it will mirror that to some extent. Yeah.
So that leads perfectly into my other question. So I really love this idea of that progress isn't linear, so that we're always going through changes, we're always making mistakes. What was one project that failed, or one rejection or something that made you grow, and how did it make you grow?
That's a great question. When I was submitting my poems for my second book, it was very different to the experience with my first book. So my first book, it was an editor who I loosely knew. He had read some of my work, and he had said, if you ever have more and you want to put something together, let me know. Now, that was really generous and really lovely of him. For the bigger book, I didn't know who to pitch it to. And so I think I just was very, very nervous. I sat on it a lot longer than I should have. And then when I started sending it out, I almost crammed too many ideas into the book. There were too many poems. They were all very different. Even though I had spent a lot of time thinking about like the structure of the book, I don't think I could see that maybe this was like 3 books worth of poetry. So I sent it out to an editor from a really well-known publishing house, and she was lovely. She rejected it, but she gave me some feedback and said, this part of the book is working really well. It doesn't really belong with the rest of the book. What could you do differently to finish the book if you remove that end section? And this whole thing we always say about like killing your darlings was really true, because I had to sit there and feel comfortable about getting rid of this probably final third of the book that I had spent years writing. And it became its own thing. But it also freed me up to write new poems to add to the actual book that it became. And those new poems are the ones that I think kind of breathed life back into the book. So that was really, really helpful. And I have had a couple of helpful rejections over the years, which is why I always say to students, don't get too freaked out when you get rejections. Some of them are just, a blanket rejection letter, but sometimes they can be the kind of key that unpicks the project for you.
Yeah,
so,
I agree.
Yeah.
So what were you feeling when, you got that rejection letter? Or even when you published your first thing, like, be stressed. So
I'm sure I cried. I'm sure I cried. I'm a crier. So I'm sure I remember being confused because I thought, but the book is done. And I spent a lot of time on the book. And then I thought, but she's right. Kind of in my gut, I knew she was right. So I think I just felt confused and I wasn't sure where to go with it. I probably brought it to my writing group. I probably listened to them all, buying me coffee and going, it's fine, you'll be fine. But she's right, because I think they probably would have seen that as well. And I went on a writing retreat with 2 friends. We go on writing retreats that we set up ourselves, maybe once or twice a year, where we book an Airbnb. We each have a room, we cook together, but then we just write. And on that retreat, I brought the book without that end bit. And it was like something had been amputated. So I remember feeling quite scared and sad, but also like, oh, there's a possibility here. I could actually bring out these early drafts that I hadn't worked on yet from the previous year. And in that retreat, I managed to map out like 10 or 15 new pieces. So that turned into a sense of achievement and almost excitement about the new pieces that I think ultimately worked. But it was tough, I won't lie. And every rejection is a little bit tough, because I think as a writer, a lot of writers wear their heart on their sleeve even though they don't know it.
Yeah.
And then they'll send their work out. And when the rejection comes back, it is like being stabbed in the heart. And then it's like, no. And it's very hard not to take it personally. But, you know, ultimately editors and publishers see so many thousands of pieces. They usually have some good insight if you are open enough to listen to them.
You said it feels like you were being amputated, like this work had been amputated. Like, it really does become a part of you. And I love that that phrase that you said, like killing your darlings. It's like when you have to kill off your favourite character. Or like in a TV show where the main person dies, you're like, oh, how's the story going to continue? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, it's absolutely gutting. I absolutely hate getting to the end of a book, getting to the end of a book series, getting to the end of any series, which is why I love series. I just want the characters to keep living and going and the plot to unfold. Unless they're overwritten, and then you're like, this should have ended. But yes, I think writing is an emotional process, and I think that's absolutely okay. And it's okay to acknowledge that, especially when we all sit down together and we're bringing like fresh drafts of things to people you maybe don't know that well in your cohort in a workshop space. And then I always see that it's kind of my job to make sure that that is a safe space for whatever needs to be discussed, because ultimately as writers we can grow best when we're getting honest, constructive feedback. So I think giving all of you the opportunity to have that is probably one of the most important parts of the degree, but a lot of students don't take that opportunity up until final year. And then I think, well, you've actually kind of missed the opportunity to get a bit more feedback from somewhat strangers, cold. That's beneficial on many levels rather. One
of my last questions. So if only we could speak to our younger selves, what is one piece of advice you've given to maybe a fresher version of you, or like even a younger version of you? What would you say?
Don't take philosophy modules. Okay. Other than that, I think I would say that being successful at university is not what I thought it meant. So back in the day when I was doing my first degree, I was under so much pressure. I put so much pressure on myself. I remember being stressed, picking modules that were really harder than they needed to be, which is one difference with the American system. You can kind of take modules from outside your program area. So I did take some philosophy modules that were so difficult I could not understand. I think success, now looking back, is getting the most out of uni. And I don't mean that in a really kind of cliched way where like, make the most of it. No, what I mean is find out what that means to you. What does getting the most mean? It might mean friendship. It might mean societies and clubs or sports. It might mean having good rapport with your teaching staff. But I think it can mean any of those or all of those. It doesn't just have to mean high marks. And so I think I wish my younger self could have had a little bit of that pressure taken off, and I would have had more fun. I'm not saying I didn't have fun, but I think I took the modules really seriously. And if I kind of failed at some task I was set, like I really hated writing dialogue and stories. And I somehow thought, oh, I'm a complete failure as a writer. I don't like writing dialogue. Well, guess what? Loads of writers do not like writing dialogue. Yeah,
that hit home a little bit. Writing dialogue. Woo!
And that's okay. I'm a poet. The dialogue is short when it happens, you know? So I think it's those kind of things, but to really tailor your experience to whatever you want to get out of it, and don't listen to the world telling you uni has to be one thing, because I really don't think it ever can be just one thing. I think it's different for everyone.
Finally, the last question I have was from Dr. Luciella. When I walked into her office to film her podcast, she was building a cute little miniature book nook set, and it was all mini books and all these adorable things. And she has a question for you. So her question was, what is a hobby or activity you do in your free time or your office hours?
Well, I definitely don't do hobbies during my office hours. I wish I could. I do frantic lesson plans during my office hours. Hobby. I have quite weird hobbies. I'm only going to say one. So let's see, which one should I say? I am pretty obsessed with train travel. I love train travel. I should also mention at this point, I get very motion sick on trains, so that's a mixed bag. But I love planning a holiday to somewhere, even if it's short, by ground, because there's something I find really, really satisfying with packing a little bag, putting it on my back. I've always got a notebook in there, and like walking to where I'm going to go, even if it means like walking to the train station and then taking, in my recent case, 24 trains to get somewhere. By the time I get there, the sense of accomplishment is only equivalent to like finishing a book. And I find that's a challenge and such a pleasure. And I wish I had more time to do that. But even doing it for, a very, very quick short trip somewhere, it's just an exploration. And so that is one of my one of my hobbies. I wish I could do it in my office hours, but I cannot. So great question, Luciella.
So finally, what is a question that you would have for the next lecturer?
Okay. So here's a question. And this is a kind of one we ask each other sometimes. But my question is, what book or text, it can be anything. It could be a song, it could be a poem, it could be a Netflix series. What book or text in a perfect world would you love to teach, but you either haven't been able or you wouldn't be allowed?
Oh,
yes.
Very controversial. Here we go.
Yeah. So I hope that one goes down okay. I look forward to hearing the answer.
Well, thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Office Hours, and thank you very much for listening. Your support means the entire world. I've been your host, Sofia Varela. Thank you very much for listening to this episode of Office Hours, and I will see you next time. Don't forget to do the following, the sharing, the liking, all of that YouTube stuff. And yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
And scene. That was so good.
What a great question.
And scene. That was so good.
What a great question.